My name is Lucia, and I am 31 years old. At 2:17 in the morning, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling me from a deep sleep. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. A woman's voice came through cold and controlled. "I am Diane Ashford. Your husband belongs to me. You should accept that." The line went dead. I looked at Garrett sleeping beside me. I did not scream. I did not cry. I started thinking. Before we begin this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If you have ever had someone underestimate your strength, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. And if you think this is a story about a betrayed wife falling apart, you are going to be surprised by what happens next. Let me take you back to understand how I got here and who I was before that phone call shattered everything I thought I knew. I built my career from nothing. After graduating from art school with a degree in interior design, I had no connections, no family money, and no safety net. What I had was a vision and an unwillingness to fail. I started Lucia Designs 6 years ago in a tiny office space in Seattle, Washington. The first year I barely made rent. The second year, I hired my first employee. By year 6, I had a team of 5 talented designers and a client list that included some of the most beautiful homes in the Pacific Northwest. My specialty was creating warm, inviting spaces that felt like home the moment you walked through the door. I was not interested in cold, sterile designs that looked good in magazines, but felt empty to live in. My clients came to me because they wanted their houses to feel like sanctuaries, and I took that responsibility seriously. My friends used to joke that I was the woman who never panicked. When a client called at midnight because the furniture delivery was wrong, I handled it. When a contractor quit mid-project, I found a replacement by morning. I had trained myself to respond to crises with logic rather than emotion, and that skill had served me well in business. I had no idea it would also serve me well in the worst moment of my personal life. I met Garrett 7 years ago at an art gallery opening. I was there for the art. He was there because his company had sponsored the event. We ended up standing in front of the same painting, a swirl of blues and greens that reminded me of the ocean, and he asked me what I thought of it. I told him honestly that I thought the artist was talented, but trying too hard to be profound. He laughed and said that was the most honest thing anyone had said all night. Garrett was different from the men I usually dated. He was ambitious, but not arrogant. He listened when I talked about my work and asked questions that showed he actually cared. On our third date, he admitted that he had looked up my company website and spent an hour reading my portfolio. That level of attention meant something to me. We dated for 3 years before getting married. I was 27, he was 30. We bought a penthouse apartment together downtown, and I paid 60% of the cost from my own savings. That was important to me. I never wanted to be financially dependent on anyone. Garrett said he loved that about me, my independence, my drive. He said it was one of the reasons he fell in love with me. For the first 4 years of our marriage, things were good. Not perfect, because nothing is perfect, but good. We supported each other's careers. We traveled when we could. We talked about having children someday, maybe in a year or two when things settled down. We were building a life together, and I believed in that life completely. 2 years ago, Garrett got a new job. He had been headhunted by Ashford Technologies, one of the biggest tech companies on the West Coast. The offer was significant. Better salary, better title, better opportunities for growth. He would be working directly with the CEO, a woman named Diane Ashford, who had built the company from her garage into a billion-dollar empire. Garrett was excited in a way I had not seen in years. He said this was his chance to really make something of himself. I supported the move completely. I even helped him prepare for his interviews, researching the company and practicing answers to potential questions. When he got the offer, we celebrated with champagne and talked about the future. Everything seemed to be falling into place. But looking back now, I can see the changes started almost immediately. About 8 months before that phone call, Garrett began traveling more for work. He said the company was expanding into new markets, and he needed to meet with clients in different cities. I understood. My own work kept me busy, and I did not question his explanations. Then there were the late-night messages. His phone would buzz at 11 at midnight, sometimes later. When I asked, he said it was from his boss. Urgent work matters. Diane Ashford was known for being demanding, he explained. She expected her team to be available around the clock. I noticed he stopped being as affectionate as he used to be. We went from making love several times a week to once every few weeks. He was always tired, always stressed about work. I blamed myself for not being more understanding. I was busy too, I reasoned. Maybe we were both just overwhelmed. One evening I was doing laundry and found a receipt in his jacket pocket. It was from an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind with a 3-month wait list and a $200 minimum per person. The date on the receipt was a Thursday night when Garrett had told me he was stuck in meetings. I asked him about it casually. He said it was a business dinner with Diane and some members of the board. They had been celebrating a successful quarter. It made sense. Everything always made sense with Garrett. He had an explanation for everything delivered with just enough detail to seem believable, but not so much that it felt rehearsed. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that 8 years together meant something, that Garrett would never betray me. I focused on my work and tried to push the doubts away. I decided to plan a special trip for our anniversary, something to reconnect and remind us both why we fell in love. I had no idea that in just a few months a phone call at 2 a.m. would change everything. And I certainly had no idea that my response to that call would set off a chain of events that would destroy a legacy 3 decades in the making. The moment that call ended, something shifted inside me. I could feel it like a switch being flipped from panic to purpose. Most people would have woken their husband, immediately demanded answers, screamed or cried or thrown things. I considered all of those options in the space of about 3 seconds. Then I rejected every single one. Here is what I understood in that moment. Diane Ashford had called me at 2 a.m. because she wanted to establish power. She wanted me to know that she could reach into my life anytime she wanted. She expected me to react emotionally, to confront Garrett, to cause a scene that would push him further into her arms. That was her game plan. I was not going to play her game. I slipped out of bed quietly and walked to the bathroom. My hands were shaking slightly, but my mind was clear. I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired and shocked, but she also looked determined. I was not going to fall apart. I was going to find out exactly what was happening, and then I was going to decide what to do about it. I went to the living room and stood on the balcony, letting the cold Seattle air wash over me. It was nearly 2:30 in the morning and the city was quiet. I thought about what Diane had said. Your husband belongs to me. 2 years. She had said it had been going on for 2 years. If that was true, it meant the affair had started almost immediately after Garrett joined her company. A memory surfaced. My mother years ago giving me advice about dealing with difficult people. When you are angry, do not act, she had said. When you are calm, make your plan. I had followed that advice in business countless times. Now I would follow it in my personal life. I went back inside and found Garrett's phone charging on his nightstand. He was still asleep, breathing deeply, completely unaware that his world was about to come crashing down. I picked up the phone and typed in the passcode. He used my birthday. The irony was not lost on me. I opened his messages and searched for Diane's name. There it was. Diane A. I started scrolling, and what I found made my stomach turn. The most recent message was from earlier that evening. You were wonderful today. See you Monday. D. I scrolled further back. Hundreds of messages over the past 2 years. Plans to meet at hotels. Inside jokes I did not understand. Terms of endearment that made me want to throw the phone across the room. But there were also other messages that told a different story. Messages where Garrett said he wanted to end things. Messages where Diane responded with what could only be described as threats. One exchange stood out. Garrett had written, I do not know if I can keep doing this. It is not fair to Lucia. Diane's response was chilling. If you leave me, your career is over. I will make sure you never work in this industry again. But if you stay, I will give you everything. The choice is yours." I kept scrolling, taking screenshots of everything important. The pattern was clear. Garrett had started this willingly, probably flattered by the attention of a powerful woman. But somewhere along the way, it had become something else. A trap. A cage built from threats and manipulation. I was still angry at Garrett. What he had done was a betrayal regardless of the circumstances. But I was also starting to understand that Diane Ashford was not just a woman having an affair. She was something far more dangerous. I put the phone back exactly where I had found it and went to the kitchen. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the counter thinking. The sun would be up in a few hours. When Garrett woke up, I would need to act normal. I would need to pretend that nothing had changed while I figured out my next move. That Sunday morning, I made breakfast like always. Eggs toast, fresh fruit. Garrett came into this kitchen looking rested and content, completely oblivious to what had happened in the night. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, kissing me on the cheek. "Very well," I said, managing a smile. "I dreamed about the ocean." We ate breakfast together and talked about nothing important. He mentioned he had some work to do in the afternoon. I said I was going to the studio to catch up on a project. Everything was normal. Everything was a lie. As soon as Garrett left for his home office, I went to my laptop and started researching Diane Ashford. I needed to know who I was dealing with. What I found was impressive on the surface. Diane was 54 years old and had founded Ashford Technologies 28 years ago. She had been featured in Forbes, Fortune, and countless other business publications. She was celebrated as one of the most powerful women in tech, a pioneer who had broken barriers and built an empire through sheer determination. She had never married. Articles described her as married to her work. She had started a program called Women in Tech that provided scholarships and mentorship to young women entering the industry. She gave speeches about empowerment and supporting each other. She was by all public accounts an inspiration. The irony made me sick. This woman who preached about women supporting women was actively destroying my marriage, manipulating my husband, and had called me in the middle of the night to assert her dominance. The public image and the private reality could not have been more different. I spent hours searching for anything that might suggest Diane had done this before. Corporate scandals, lawsuits, rumors. But she was clean. Her public relations team was exceptional, or she was very good at hiding her tracks. Probably both. By the end of that Sunday, I had made a decision. I was not going to confront Garrett yet. I was not going to tip off Diane that I knew anything. I was going to investigate, and I was going to find out if there were others who had been in Garrett's position. Because a woman who called someone's wife at 2 a.m. to claim ownership of their husband did not strike me as someone doing this for the first time. I put my laptop away and made dinner. Garrett came out of his office looking stressed, and I asked about his day with convincing interest. He talked about projects and deadlines, and I nodded at all the right moments. That night, lying next to him in the dark, I thought about the road ahead. It would not be easy. It would require patience and planning, and the ability to pretend that everything was fine while I gathered the information I needed. But I was ready. Diane Ashford thought she had won. She thought her phone call would break me or drive me to do something rash. She had no idea that she had just awakened something far more dangerous than a crying, heartbroken wife. She had awakened a woman with nothing to lose and a very good plan. The next morning, I called my friend Piper. We had been roommates in college, and while our careers had taken us in different directions, we had stayed close. Piper was now an investigative journalist for a major business publication. If anyone could help me dig into Diane Ashford's past, it was her. I kept the details vague at first. I told her I had concerns about a CEO who might be abusing her power and asked if she could look into it without knowing the name. Piper agreed immediately. She trusted my instincts, and more importantly, she loved a good story. I also made another call that day to a lawyer named Sienna Hayes. Sienna specialized in employment law and sexual harassment cases. A colleague had recommended her years ago, and I had kept her card just in case. I never imagined I would actually need it. We met at her office that afternoon. Sienna was a sharp woman in her 40s with gray-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. I told her everything. The phone call, the messages, the threats. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. If what you are describing is accurate, this is not just infidelity. This is a systematic abuse of power. But to build a case, we need evidence from multiple sources. One person's testimony against a CEO of her stature will not be enough. I nodded. I had already figured that out. What if there are others? Sienna leaned back in her chair. Then we have a pattern of behavior. That changes everything. I left her office feeling like I finally had a direction. I was not just going to expose an affair. I was going to expose a predator. 1 week later, Piper called me with news that made my blood run cold. She had dug into Ashford Technologies' employment records, talked to sources, and cross-referenced resignation dates with other data points. What she found was disturbing. Over the past 10 years, at least 4 male employees had left the company under similar circumstances. All of them were married. All of them had been rising stars who suddenly resigned and moved on to other companies or different industries entirely. Piper had managed to contact 2 of them. Neither would speak on the record because they had signed non-disclosure agreements when they left. But one of them, a man named Bradley Cole, had agreed to meet with me privately. He said he had been carrying guilt for 7 years and wanted to help if he could. I met Bradley at a coffee shop far from downtown, the kind of place where no one would recognize either of us. He was 41 with tired eyes and a wedding ring tan line on his finger. His marriage had not survived whatever had happened at Ashford. Bradley spoke quietly, checking the door every few minutes. I was director of sales, he said. I thought I was being recognized for my work. Special projects. Direct access to the CEO. I was flattered. The story he told was sickeningly familiar. Diane had selected him, cultivated him, and gradually made the relationship physical. When he tried to end it because his wife had started asking questions, Diane had made it clear that his career would be over if he walked away. She has files on everyone, Bradley said. Performance reviews that can be interpreted different ways. Emails taken out of context. She collects leverage and she uses it. Bradley had chosen to leave anyway. He received a severance package and signed an NDA. His wife divorced him after finding evidence of the affair. He lost his family and had to rebuild his career from scratch in a different city. I have never told anyone the full truth, he admitted. The NDA, the shame, all of it. But I have regretted staying silent. She has probably done this to others since me. I told him he was right. I told him about Garrett, about the phone call, about what I was planning. Bradley's eyes widened. You are going to go after her. I am going to stop her, I said. But I need help. I need people who are willing to tell the truth. Bradley was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Count me in. I have wanted to see her face consequences for 7 years. Over the next 2 weeks, Piper and I found 2 more men who were willing to talk. Jordan, who now worked at another tech company, had a story almost identical to Bradley's. Elliot III had needed therapy for 3 years after leaving Ashford. All of them had signed NDAs. All of them had been silenced by shame and legal threats. Sienna reviewed the NDAs and gave us promising news. Non-disclosure agreements could be voided if they were used to cover up illegal activity like sexual harassment or abuse of power. If we could demonstrate a pattern of predatory behavior, the men could speak without fear of legal repercussions. We were building something. A coalition of people who had been wronged coming together to finally tell the truth. But we needed more. We needed hard evidence that would be undeniable. That was when Piper made another discovery. Diane Ashford owned a private apartment in downtown Seattle that was not listed under the company's assets. It was her personal property paid for in cash, kept completely separate from her business life. Piper found a building manager who was willing to talk off the record. He confirmed that Diane had been bringing different men to that apartment for years. Always professional types. Always married based on the rings he had seen. The manager had assumed they were affairs and kept his mouth shut because it was not his business. But now it was evidence. Evidence of a pattern that stretched back over a decade. I also continued to gather evidence from Garrett's phone. I found emails, calendar entries, and messages that painted a complete picture. The promotions he had received, the bonuses, all of them coincided with periods of increased contact with Diane. He had been rewarded for compliance and threatened when he resisted. Did that excuse what he had done? No. He had made choices, and those choices had hurt me deeply. But I was starting to see him as both a participant and a victim in Diane's system. That complexity would have to be addressed later. For now, I needed to focus on the bigger target. Diane Ashford had spent 30 years building a legacy. She had magazine covers and awards, and a reputation as a champion of women. All of it was built on lies, and I was going to tear it all down. 3 weeks after that 2 a.m. phone call, I gathered everyone in Sienna's conference room. Bradley, Jordan, Elliot, Piper, Sienna herself. We sat around the table like generals planning a battle because in many ways, that is exactly what we were doing. I outlined the plan. Ashford Technologies held its annual shareholder meeting every spring. It was a major event covered by financial media attended by investors and board members. Diane always gave a keynote speech celebrating the company's achievements. It was her moment to shine, to remind everyone of the empire she had built. This year, it would be her moment of reckoning. We go public at the shareholder meeting, I said. Maximum exposure, maximum impact. Diane will not be able to spin or suppress the story if it breaks in front of 500 people and live cameras. Bradley looked nervous but determined. The NDA, Sienna jumped in. I have reviewed all of your agreements. They contain standard confidentiality clauses, but they cannot legally be used to silence testimony about harassment or abuse. If you speak truthfully about illegal behavior, the NDAs are unenforceable. Jordan nodded slowly. So we just stand up and start talking. Not exactly, I said. We need to be strategic. Piper is going to help me get press credentials for the event. During the question and answer session, I will ask Diane a question that opens the door. Then we show the evidence on the main screen. How do we do that? Elliot asked. Piper smiled slightly. The AV system at the convention center uses standard protocols. I have a contact who can help us access it remotely. When Lucia gives the signal, the video plays on every screen in the room. We spent hours going over details. The video would include recorded statements from Bradley, Jordan, and Elliot, with their faces obscured and voices slightly altered to protect their privacy until they chose to reveal themselves. It would include screenshots of messages and emails. It would include the building manager's testimony about the private apartment. Sienna prepared legal documents, a formal complaint to the board of directors, evidence packets for the media, everything needed to make this not just a public accusation but an airtight case. 1 week before the meeting, I did something I had not planned. I called Garrett's mother. Patricia was a sweet woman in her 60s who had always treated me like a daughter. She adored Garrett and had no idea what her son had been doing. But I felt she deserved to know before everything became public. We met at a quiet restaurant near her home. I told her everything as gently as I could. The affair, the manipulation, the plan to expose Diane. Patricia listened with tears streaming down her face. I knew something was wrong, she whispered. He has been so distant lately. I thought it was work stress. It was, I said, just not the kind either of us imagined. Patricia reached across the table and took my hand. What do you need from me? Just know that I am not doing this to hurt Garrett. I am doing it to stop someone who has hurt many people. But Garrett will be affected. The whole family will be affected. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she squeezed my hand. You do what you have to do. Garrett made his choices. Now he has to live with the consequences. But you, Lucia, You have always been strong. I admire that about you." Her support meant more than I could express. It also reminded me of what was at stake. This was not just about revenge or even justice. It was about stopping someone who would continue to hurt people if no one stood up to say enough. The night before the shareholder meeting, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. A month ago, I had been a successful designer with a happy marriage, or so I thought. Now I was about to walk into a convention center and blow up the career of one of the most powerful women in tech. I thought about Diane's phone call, the coldness in her voice, the certainty that she could claim my husband like property. She had expected me to crumble. She had underestimated me completely. Tomorrow she would learn exactly how badly she had miscalculated. The shareholder meeting was held at Seattle's largest convention center. 500 people filled the main hall. Investors, board members, executives, journalists. Cameras lined the back of the room. This was Ashford Technology's biggest annual event, and Diane Ashford was the star. I arrived early, dressed in a black suit that made me look like any other business journalist. Piper had secured credentials for me under a pseudonym. I took my seat in the middle section, close enough to be heard during the question period, but not so close that I would draw attention beforehand. Bradley, Jordan, and Elliot were scattered throughout the audience. Sienna sat near the back with her briefcase full of documents. Piper was in the press section, her laptop open and ready to live stream the moment everything started. And Garrett was there too, sitting in the front row with the other executives, completely unaware that his wife was 15 rows behind him, about to change both of their lives forever. Diane took the stage at exactly 10 o'clock. She looked impeccable in a cream-colored suit, her silver hair perfectly styled, her presence commanding. The audience applauded as she approached the podium. "Good morning," she began, her voice carrying easily through the room. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate another extraordinary year at Ashford Technologies." She spoke for 20 minutes about the company's achievements: revenue growth, new partnerships, expansion into emerging markets. She talked about innovation and leadership and the importance of building something that lasts. Then she got to the part that made my stomach turn. "I want to take a moment to talk about our Women in Tech initiative," Diane said. "As many of you know, empowering women in this industry has always been my passion. I believe that women should support each other, lift each other up, and create opportunities for the next generation." The audience applauded again. I watched Diane smile graciously, accepting the praise for a program built on hypocrisy. "This is my legacy," she continued. "Not the profits or the stock price, but the lives we have changed. The young women who will become leaders because we showed them it was possible." The question and answer session began. Several people asked predictable questions about quarterly projections and market strategy. Diane answered each one smoothly. The picture of competence and confidence. Then the moderator pointed to me. Yes, the woman in the middle section. I stood up, microphone in hand, and felt every eye in the room turn toward me. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. "Thank you," I said. "I have a question for Ms. Ashford about her legacy." Diane smiled politely. "Of course. Go ahead. You spoke about supporting women and creating opportunities. Can you explain how that aligns with using your position as CEO to pursue relationships with married male employees and threatening to destroy their careers if they refuse?" The room went silent. Completely, utterly silent. Diane's smile froze on her face. "I am sorry," she said. "That is an outrageous accusation." "Then perhaps you can explain this." I looked toward the AV booth and gave a small nod. The screens around this room flickered, and suddenly the video began to play. Bradley's voice, disguised but clear, describing how Diane had targeted him. Jordan recounting the threats. Elliot talking about the years of therapy he needed afterward. Screenshots of messages appeared. Diane's own words displayed for everyone to see. "If you leave me, your career is over. You belong to me. I will destroy you." The room erupted. People stood up shouting questions. Cameras flashed. The board members in the front row looked at each other in shock. Diane gripped the podium, her face pale. "This is fabricated. This is a smear campaign." I walked toward the front of the room, and the crowd parted to let me through. When I reached the aisle near the stage, I stopped and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "My name is Lucia. You called me 5 weeks ago at 2:17 in the morning to tell me that my husband belongs to you. I recorded that call. Would you like me to play it?" Diane's mouth opened and closed. For the first time in her life, she had no response. "Play it," someone shouted from the audience. I nodded to Piper. A moment later, Diane's voice filled the convention center. "I am Diane Ashford. Your husband belongs to me. You should accept that." The room exploded again. Board members were on their phones. Journalists were typing frantically. Investors were heading for the exits, already planning to sell their shares. Bradley stood up from his seat. "My name is Bradley Cole. I worked at Ashford Technologies 7 years ago. Everything in that video is true." Jordan rose next. "I am Jordan Reeves. It happened to me too." Elliot followed. "I am Elliot Marsh. She destroyed my marriage and my mental health. I have been afraid to speak for years. Not anymore." Sienna walked to the stage and handed Diane a folder. "This is a formal complaint to the board of directors, along with evidence supporting claims of sexual harassment and abuse of power. You will also be hearing from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission." Diane looked at the folder like it was a snake. Security personnel were approaching the stage, unsure of what to do. The chairwoman of the board was already at the microphone announcing that the meeting was suspended pending an internal investigation. Through all of it, I stood in the aisle watching. Garrett had turned around in his seat and was staring at me. His face was a mixture of shock, shame, and something that might have been relief. I met his eyes for a moment, then looked away. This was not about him. Not anymore. Diane was escorted off the stage by security, flanked by board members who would not meet her eyes. 28 years of building an empire, and it had crumbled in less than 30 minutes. I walked toward the exit, and Piper fell into step beside me. "That was incredible," she said. "The live stream has 50,000 views already. By tonight it will be everywhere." I nodded but did not smile. There was no joy in this, only the grim satisfaction of justice finally being served. Outside the convention center, I stopped and took a deep breath. The Seattle sky was gray as always, but the air felt cleaner somehow. Lighter. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Bradley. "Thank you. For the first time in 7 years, I feel free." I typed back a simple response. "We all are." The aftermath came faster and harder than anyone expected. Within 48 hours, Diane Ashford was removed as CEO of the company she had founded. The board of directors held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to terminate her employment. Her shares were frozen pending investigation, and she was banned from company property. The story dominated news cycles for weeks. Tech pioneer exposed as predator. Ashford CEO ousted after harassment revelations. Women in tech program founder accused of exploiting male employees. The irony of that last headline was not lost on anyone. More victims came forward after the shareholder meeting. Men who had been too afraid to speak found courage in seeing others tell their truth. By the end of the first month, 7 people had confirmed similar experiences with Diane spanning more than a decade. Sienna filed multiple civil suits on behalf of the victims. The cases were strong, built on documented evidence and corroborating testimony. Legal experts interviewed on news programs agreed that the non-disclosure agreements the men had signed were unenforceable because they had been used to conceal illegal conduct. The Women in Tech program, Diane's supposed legacy, was quietly renamed and restructured under new leadership. Her name was removed from all promotional materials. The scholarships she had funded continued but without any association with the woman who had created them. As for Diane herself, she disappeared from public life almost immediately. Her lawyers released a statement denying all allegations, but she never spoke publicly again. Within 2 months, she was facing criminal charges for sexual harassment and abuse of power. She would not go to prison, but she would face 5 years of probation, mandatory counseling, and a lifetime ban from serving as an executive at any publicly traded company. Her legacy was destroyed. The magazine covers and awards meant nothing now. She would be remembered not as a pioneer, but as a predator who used her position to exploit and manipulate people for her own satisfaction. 3 days after the shareholder meeting, I finally talked to Garrett. He came to our apartment looking like he had not slept in days. His eyes were red, his clothes wrinkled. He stood in the doorway like a stranger asking permission to enter his own home. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked. "Why did you not just confront me?" I sat on the couch and looked at him. "Because if I had confronted you, you would have warned her, or she would have found a way to spin it. I needed to do this right." "I wanted to leave her," Garrett said. "So many times. But she had so much power over my career. I was trapped." "You made choices," I said quietly. "You could have come to me. You could have quit that job. You could have done a lot of things differently." Garrett sat down heavily in a chair across from me. I know I do not deserve your forgiveness." "I do not know if you do either," I admitted. "Right now, I am not thinking about forgiveness. I am thinking about what happens next. What does happen next?" I had thought about this question for 5 weeks. I still did not have a complete answer. I need time. I cannot just go back to pretending everything is fine. Garrett nodded slowly. "I understand." "We should separate," I said. "Formally. You should move out, get your own place, and figure out who you are when you are not being manipulated or cheating on your wife." He flinched at the word cheating, but he did not argue. And then we see. I am not saying we are over forever. I am saying I do not know, and I need space to figure it out. Garrett left that night. He packed a bag, kissed me on the forehead, and walked out the door. I did not cry. I was not sure what I felt anymore. The apartment was quieter after he left. Emptier, but also strangely more peaceful. For the first time in months, I did not have to pretend. I did not have to act like everything was normal. I could just exist with my own thoughts and feelings. Sienna called a few days later with news that Diane's legal team was trying to countersue me for defamation. The suit was dismissed almost immediately. You cannot sue someone for defamation when they are telling the truth. I also received a message from an unexpected source. Garrett's mother, Patricia, sent me a long email expressing her support and apologizing for her son's behavior. She said she was proud of me and that whatever I decided about my marriage, she would always consider me family. That meant more than I could express. In the wreckage of my personal life, small kindnesses like that were lifelines. Bradley Jordan and Elliot stayed in touch. We had formed an unlikely bond through this experience, a group of strangers connected by shared trauma and the courage to finally speak up. Bradley started a support group for men who had experienced workplace harassment. Jordan returned to therapy and began writing about his experience. Elliot was rebuilding his life slowly but steadily. We had all lost something because of Diane Ashford. But we had also found something: solidarity, justice, the knowledge that we were not alone. 1 year has passed since that phone call at 2:17 in the morning. I am 32 now, and my life looks completely different than it did 14 months ago. The apartment is still mine. Lucia Designs has grown to 10 employees and a larger office space. My work brings me joy in a way it did not when I was carrying the weight of suspicion and betrayal. The first few months after everything happened were hard. I went to therapy to process the trauma of discovering my husband's affair and the stress of orchestrating Diane's downfall. My therapist told me something I will never forget. "You handled this situation with remarkable composure," she said. "But do not forget to give yourself permission to fall apart sometimes. Strength is not about never breaking. It is about putting yourself back together." I took that advice to heart. I let myself cry when I needed to. I let myself be angry. I let myself grieve the marriage I thought I had and the husband I thought I knew. And slowly, day by day, I started to heal. My relationship with Garrett is complicated. We are still technically married but living separately. He has been in intensive therapy working through his own issues around ambition validation and why he allowed himself to be manipulated for so long. We have dinner together once a month, not as husband and wife, but as two people trying to figure out if there is anything worth saving. I do not know how that story ends. Maybe we will reconcile eventually. Maybe we will divorce. For now, I am comfortable with uncertainty. I have learned that you do not always need to know the ending to keep moving forward. The lessons from this experience stay with me every day. First, when someone attacks you, responding with calmness is more powerful than responding with emotion. Diane expected me to fall apart. My composure threw her off balance and gave me time to plan. Second, power does not give anyone the right to own another person. Diane thought her position made her untouchable. She was wrong. Third, sometimes protecting yourself also means protecting others. By speaking up, I did not just save my own dignity. I gave voice to people who had been silenced for years. Fourth, forgiveness is a process, not a decision. No one gets to tell you when or whether to forgive someone who has hurt you. That is your choice, made on your own timeline. Fifth, legacy is not about titles or achievements. It is about how you treat people. Diane spent 28 years building an empire, and it all collapsed because she could not treat the people around her with basic decency. I think about her sometimes, not with hatred or even anger anymore, just a kind of sad recognition that she threw away everything she had built because she could not control her own worst impulses. All that intelligence, all that drive wasted on manipulation and cruelty. Last month, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. A young woman named Arya who was starting her own design business. She had read about what happened at the shareholder meeting and wanted to meet me. "You are kind of my hero," she said, looking embarrassed. "Not because of what you did to Diane Ashford, but because you stood up for yourself. You did not let someone powerful just walk all over you." I invited her to sit down, and we talked for an hour about business, about life, about standing up for what is right, even when it is hard. When she left, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. If my story can help even one person find the courage to stand up against someone who is trying to control them, then everything I went through was worth it. The phone call came at 2:17 in the morning. A woman told me my husband belonged to her. She thought that would be the end of my story. She had no idea it was just the beginning. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had someone try to intimidate you into silence? Have you ever found the strength to stand up when everyone expected you to back down? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about people who refuse to be broken. Thank you for watching until the end. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, no matter what you are facing, you are stronger than you know. Sometimes the darkest moments are just the setup for your greatest comeback. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next one.